Friends, welcome to the channel JIV and CIV Made Simple. This is our certified credit professional at 28 March 2026 memory based question along with explanation. These are the set of questions which appear in the examination, and you will be able to see what is the level of question, what are the most frequently asked topics, and how to go approach a question. I will explain each and every option so that you can know how to eliminate the option. So watch till the end the video, and it will essentially help you in your upcoming examination. Concept will be same, question pattern may be different, but concept will be same. So try to gather the concept that we learned from these questions. Let's get started with our very first question. So in a typical bank internal credit risk framework, that is RP1 to RP8, which of the following is correctly matched? So they have given RP2 high risk, RP3 moderate risk, RP5 low risk, RP6 very high risk. So how to go about solving this question? Let me explain. So you can think of bank internal credit risk rating. Yeah, here our main focus is what? Bank internal credit risk rating. So bank internal credit risk rating, you can think of it like a kind of credit score. Okay, but in the reverse order. Imagine you are lending, this is you, and these are your friends. You are lending money to your friends. So RP1, RP1 is your star friend. What does it mean? A star friend? It means they have a great job. They have a great job. They do not have any debt, right? And always pay you back before you even ask. So they're the lowest risk you have, isn't it? They are your star friend, which means they have job, they have no debt, and they will get you money, get back your money even before you ask for. So the risk is lowest here. Then comes, as the number goes up, suppose you go to RP2, you goes to RP3, RP4, and so on. As the number goes up, what happen? Your friend get a little bit shakier, right? Maybe they forget to pay once in a while, or their business is not doing great. By the time we hit RP6, you are starting to sweat, and this friend is substantial risk. The friend who is having RP6 is substantial risk. It is basically substantial risk zone, to be more precise, right? So they are struggling, and there is a very high chance that you might not see your money back for a long time. What about RP8? Yes, think about it. Suppose we go to RP8. So that is the friend who changed their phone number and move away. This is the friend who changed their phone number and he have moved away. That is called default case. RP8 means default case. So in this question, if you look at this particular question, so what they have given? RP2 high risk? No. RP3 moderate risk? So correctly matched they are asking. So RP6 very high risk? Yes, this is the correct one, right? RP6 is correctly matched with very high risk, because as the number climb toward 8, the danger to the bank money shoots up. So to remember the scale, just use the danger meter rule. So think about it. Lower the number, safer the lender. Lower number, it means safer lender. First point. And higher number, it means risky pretender. Right? So number 1, if you look at the number 1, is number 1 customer. And number 1 customer is safest. And if you look at the 6 is substantial risk. As for substantial risk. And if you look at the 8 means 8. Yes, 8. What does it mean? The bank ate the loss because they defaulted. Okay. So now what we learn from this question is that, in an RP scale, 1 is the best, 8 is the worst. And if you move from RP1 to RP3, generally consider the investment grade. Suppose if they ask you, what is the meaning of investment grade? So yes, please answer that RP1 to RP3 is called investment grade, and it means low to moderate risk. In RP1 we have low risk, in RP3 we have the moderate risk, isn't it? Now one more thing I want to tell you, that if it is RP6, then this is the red flag zone. Please understand, RP6 means red flag zone, substantial or very high risk. And RP8 is the end of the road, which means the default. Yeah, RP8 means the default case, or we call it the end of the road. right? The borrower has failed to pay. That's it. Now friends, let's look at the next question that we have. This question is regarding the SARFAESI timeline. Now the question is, which of the following statement regarding SARFAESI statutory timeline is incorrect? So I have given all possible timeline in a single question and I will explain it. Borrower is given 60 days for 13 to notice. Bank must respond to objection within 15 days. 30 days public notice for first auction. Borrower can appeal to DRT within 60 days of the section number 13 subsection number 4 measures. Friends, before continuing the explanation of this question, let me introduce you to our CCP Certified Credit Professional Comprehensive course. In this particular course, you get previous year question paper. Almost 14 PDF have been uploaded. Quizzes and mock tests, 63 tests are there. Equip you with the sufficient question for the practice. Videos are there, 37 videos are there covering the entire syllabus, and PDF theory and MCQs are there. So this entire content is prepared. This is a one-stop solution for those aspirants who are looking for clearing the CGP examination in the very first attempt. If you go through the theory and MCQ folder, we have categorized in the 6 folder as given in the IIBF syllabus. Inside each folder you get separate theory PDF, MCQs PDF. That is for PDF part. All PDFs are downloadable. In the videos part you get similar videos explanation, and in the mock test and quizzes part you get mock test to attempt. So this is a fully fledged course for those who are looking for clearing the CCP. You can check out the link in the description section for more detail. Back to this question. So you can think of this SARFAESI as a legal countdown, right? In simple way, you can think of this SARFAESI as a kind of, legal countdown. Okay. So that a bank used to recover money when a borrower stopped paying. It's like a referee in a boxing match. So what is the first step? The first step is the warning. Okay, the bank give the borrower a 60-day notice. First of all, 60-day notice is given, right, to pay up. This is the 13 subsection 2 notice. Then comes the argument. Think about it. This is the basic way to understand argument. Argument means if the borrower complain or borrower has an objection, the bank can't just ignore them, right? The bank can't just ignore them. They must reply within 15 days. 15 days reply. That's called argument. So okay, suppose borrower has any complaint or any objection he has raised, so obviously bank have to reply, and the bank is given 15 days to reply. Third thing is the auction. Auction means if the bank decide to sell the property, they have to tell the public 30 days in advance, right? They have to tell the public 30 days in advance, okay, that I'm going to sell this for the first sale. They have to tell 30 days in advance for the first sale. And fourth thing after that is the legal fight, right? It's called the legal fight. Legal fight means if the bank take possession of the property, right? So that comes 13 subsection 4, right? The borrower has the right to complain to DRT. Suppose the bank take the possession of the property, right? The borrower has the right to complain to DRT, Debt Recovery Tribunal. But here is the catch. The law does not give them a long time to complain. They only get 45 days, not for 60. If they wait 60 days, they are too late and the referee has already ended the match. So use the countdown memory trick to keep this number straight. So think about this, 60 days to pay. This is the longest time given. So use the countdown memory trick to keep this number straight. So 60 days to pay, the longest time which is given, 60 days. Then 45 days to pray. Filing an appeal at the DRT is like a prayer for help. This way you can remember. 60 day, right? 60 day to pay. Okay. The longest time which is given for paying. Then comes 45 day. 45 day to pray. Pray means what? Pray means filing an appeal at DRT is like a prayer for help. Then comes 30 days. 30 days to display, right? Display. Why, like public notice for auction. And 15 days to reply, which means bank response to objection. So 60 to pay, 45 to pray, 30 to display, 15 to repay. Now let's come back to the option that they have provided and let's eliminate the option. So incorrect they are asking. Option number A, borrower is giving 60 days for 13 to notice. Exactly. Bank must respond to objection within 15 days. Correct. 30-day public notice for first auction. Correct. Borrower can appeal to DRT within 60 days. Incorrect. The answer is 45 days. Okay, so what we learned from this discussion is that always DRT appeal time is always 45 days from the date the bank take action under section 13 subsection 4. And the 60-day trap, don't confuse the notice period with the appeal period. Right, that is the point. Now let's shift our focus to the next question that we have, which is regarding the given frequent check return, rising debtor despite flat sale, mid-year auditor change, 10% market correction in the stock price. So imagine that you lend money to a friend to open a bakery, right? So obviously you expect them to buy flour, sugar and oven. So what you are observing, you start noticing something strange, like there are frequent check return. So you see that their check for the flour delivery are bouncing. Why they are bouncing? If they are selling bread, they should have cash, isn't it? So this is a huge red flag. Yes, frequent check bouncing, it is a huge red flag. Then comes rising debtor despite flat sale. So your friend say, I'm not selling more bread, but then claim more people owe me money for bread. This does not add up. Usually this means they are creating fake bill to move money out of the business to someone else's pocket. So that is what I mean to say rising debtor despite flat sale. Your friend say, I'm not selling more bread, but then claim more people owe me money for the bread. So it's kind of, fake bill creation, right? So usually this means they are creating fake bill to move money out of the business to someone else's pocket. Then comes mid-year auditor change. Think about it. Suddenly the person checking the bakery account quit in July and new one is hired. This is like a pilot jumping out of a plane mid-flight. It usually means auditor saw something illegal and did not want to sign their name to it. And what about for the 10% market correction? Think about it. If the whole stock market dropped by 10%, that is like a rainy day. It is like a rainy day that affects every shop in the town. It does not mean that your friend is stealing from the bakery. It just means economy is having a bad day. So EWS should be specific to the person whom you lent money. So D is wrong. A, B, C, 1, 2 and 3 are clearly increasing EWS. Right. So the correct answer is 1, 2 and 3. Option number B. So there is a trick you can use to remember it. Just remember CAD rule. The rule I call it CAD rule. C for check bouncing. Right. Check is bouncing. Then this is a kind of EWS. A means what? Auditor leaving. Suppose there is an auditor and he is leaving. So this is a kind of whistleblower signal. Right. It is a kind of whistleblower signal. B for debtor rising. Suppose your debtor is rising. Okay. So yes, this is the fake paperwork signal. Right. Debtor rising is a kind of fake paperwork signal. So remember, if the prompt mention, if it mention market or economy, ignore it. That is a systemic risk or not a borrower cheat. Right. So I hope this is crystal clear. One more thing I want to tell you, that EWS is further categorized to internal versus external EWS. So EWS for diversion are always internal. Right. Suppose there is an early warning signal for the diversion of fund. So they are always internal inside the company book. And if you look at the market prices, they are external. Again, auditor signal. A change in the auditor during the year is one of the strongest sign of financial fraud. So I hope this concept is crystal clear. Now, question number 5. That's about the limitation of document. This is a very vital life or death topic for banker. If the limitation period expire, the bank loses its legal right to see the borrower to recover the money. It's like use by date on the milk carton. Once it is gone, you cannot use in the court. Now the question is, according to the Limitation Act 1963, which statement is correct? DPN limitation is 2 year. Term loan limitation is always 12 year. Fresh limitation start if AOD is signed before expiry. Part payment after expiry. Revive limitation. So these are the 4 options they have given. Just pause the video, think about it, and let me explain what is the basic logic here. Think about it. You can think of the Limitation Act. You can think of the Limitation Act as a legal timer. Yeah, you can think of it like a legal timer. For most of the bank loan, the law gives the bank 3 years to take the borrower to court if they stop paying. Suppose borrower stop paying now. Right, the borrower stop paying. So it takes 3 years. Right, 3 years for what? 3 years to sue you. Right. So for most of the bank loan, the law gives the bank 3 years to take the borrower to court. Okay. So in most of the cases, it is 3 years. So you can remember it like, 3 year clock rule. So if you imagine a borrower sign a document in London and courier it to bank in Mumbai, since Indian stamp paper is not available in London, the law give you a grace period, right? So Indian stamp paper is not available in London, so law give you a grace period. And what is that? Once that envelope land in India, you have exactly 3 months to get it stamped. Please remember. So if you look at the option number C, document executed outside India must be stamped within 3 months. Exactly, this is correct. This is correct. Now, third concept we have is the uncurable mistake. Uncurable mistake, which means some document like DPN, that is called demand promissory note, they are very strict. They are, very strict. So if you forget to stamp a DPN, suppose you did not stamp a DPN, you cannot just pay a fine letter, right? You cannot just pay a fine letter to fix it. It become dead legally, right? So if you look at the option number D, what it say? Unstamped DPN can be cured. No, that's wrong, right? And what about vetting? So vetting is a fancy word that's called legal check. Okay, so the bank lawyer vet the document to ensure there are no loopholes. Vetting means what? Legal checking. So this is just a one-time thing. If the loan term changes later, the new paper must be vetted also. So it's saying only a one-time process at the first sanction. It's wrong. Actually, it is not a one-time thing. If suppose the loan document changes or if the loan term changes, so the new paper must be vetted also. So the correct answer to this question is obviously option number C. So to remember this 3-month rule for the foreign document, you can use the import rule. So if it is signed at the C, you have month count of 3, right? Foreign document, please think of it. If there is a foreign document, then 3 months from arrival. And if it is DPN, it says stamp now or nothing, right? There is no exception. You can't pay a penalty to fix a DPN stamp error. I hope this is clear. And one more thing I want to tell you about execution. So whenever you see this word execution, it means signing a document. Stamping must happen before or at the time of execution. And then one more section you remember, section number 18 of the Indian Stamp Act. This is a law that allows 3-month window for the document received from abroad. Examiner love this DPN trap, right? That while many document can be cured or fixed by paying a penalty, usually 10 times the duty, but DPN and bill of exchange cannot be cured if they are unstamped. I hope it is crystal clear. Now, very good question we are dealing with, willful defaulter. So, option they have given, which scenario specifically qualify a borrower balance more than 25 lakh as willful defaulter? Default due to industry recession, default diversion of fund for unauthorized purpose, default due to raw material price hike, default due to buyer bankruptcy. Very good question. So this question pertains to the willful defaulter. So friends, willful defaulter, you can think of the financial theft. You can think of the financial thief. Okay, rather than a struggling businessman. If suppose you lend 100 rupees to a friend, okay, you give 100 rupees to a friend to buy a textbook for an exam. Why you give? To buy a textbook for an exam. So first scenario is that, your friend goes to the shop, but the book price has doubled or the shop is closed due to a strike. They can't get the book and they can't pay you back yet, right? So this is a kind of genuine default. So that person goes to the book shop, but that book shop was either closed or the book price has doubled. So he can't get the book back. So he can't pay you, they can't pay you back. Now scenario number B, think about it. Your friend take your 100 rupees, ignore the bookstore, right, and go to the cinema. You go to the cinema. They had the money, but they diverted it for a purpose you did not approve of. In banking, if a borrower has a balance of over 25 lakh and they use the loan money, right, for something other than the business, that's called diversion, right, or move it to a personal account. So suppose they move to a personal account, that's called siphoning. Please understand this terminology, very, very important. Company rely on the team of independent sales agent. So, and obviously the sales agent work on the commission. now their management is considering a structural change to their compensation model. So you can see now selling price per unit have given, actually it is $200 per unit, right? Now variable cost per unit, it's obviously $130, out of which $20 is commission. So then we have the proposed variable cost this much. Original fixed cost is so proposed variable cost means what? No commission, fixed salary increase. Original fixed cost was $450,000. Proposed fixed cost was $6 lakh. Now the question they are asking you, if the Spark Gear Electronic expect to sell 8,000 unit next year, which compensation structure will yield a high operating profit and by how much? So they have given the original plan, the proposed plan. Original plan is a commission based, proposed plan is a salary based. They have given original variable cost, proposed variable cost, original fixed cost, proposed variable, proposed fixed cost. So originally, right, originally they work on the commission. Now they want to change it to the salary model. That is a salary based or compensation model, that both are the same thing, right? So basically there is a transition in the model that is happening here, right? So you have to tell me that which compensation structure will hold a higher operating profit, whether it is commission based or salary based, and by how much, right? The four options have been given. Now let's go through the given selling price per unit, which is $200, right? And also variable cost per unit they have given $130, right? And the fixed cost they have given is how much? $450,000. Fine. Now can you tell me what is the profit per unit? What is the profit per unit? So profit per unit is 200 minus 130, which is equal to $70. Fine. $70 per unit. This is the profit per unit. Now we need to multiply this $70 with 8,000. Right. We need to multiply it with 8,000 because they are selling 8,000 unit next year. Right. So profit per unit we have got 70 rupees per dollar, because selling price minus variable cost is the same as the profit. No, actually this is not complete profit. To be more precise, I will say contribution per unit, not profit. Profit is a wrong word to say here. Contribution per unit is 70 rupees per dollar. Now, so that is per unit. So if multiply it by 8,000 unit, so how much it will give us? It will give us 5,60,000. So this is the entire compensation, and you know in the compensation part there are some part of the fixed cost also. So what we need to do, out of 5,60,000, which is our contribution, we need to subtract the fixed cost portion. What is the fixed cost they have given? So I think let me show you the fixed cost they have given is you can see, yes. So we are taking original only right now, 4,50,000. So just subtract 4,50,000. So this will give you the actual profit, total profit, right? So total profit is how much? I think it is $1,10,000. So this is the profit under the original condition. Now let's switch our focus to the proposed plan, right? Proposed plan. So in the case of proposed plan, you know, no commission is there. In earlier there was commission, $20 commission was there. Now in the proposed, commission has been removed. Fixed salary has been increased. Earlier fixed cost was how much? $4,50,000. Now it is $6 lakh. Now let's compute. So what about the variable cost? See, variable cost is new. Variable cost is 110. So first of all, selling price in the proposed plan is how much? Selling price is $200 only. Selling price remain unchanged. What is the new variable cost? Earlier it was 130. Now it is just 110 because commission has been removed. Right. Now what is the new fixed cost? So the new fixed cost they have given is $6 lakh. Now first of all, we have to compute the profit, right? So to get the profit, first of all let's calculate the contribution per unit. So what is the contribution per unit? This is selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, right? So that is how much? Very simple. See, the contribution per unit is now how much? 90 rupees or $90 per unit, right? So what is the profit? So overall profit is same, just multiplied by 8,000. So 90 multiplied by 8,000. This is your total contribution. Subtract the fixed cost, which is 6 lakh. So that will give us how much? 7,20,000 minus 6 lakh. So that is how much? $1,20,000. That is our profit. Okay. So now proposed plan profit is 1,20,000. Original plan profit was 1,10,000. So obviously you can see proposed plan has increased by $10,000. So proposed plan win by $10,000. So what is the correct answer to this question? The correct answer is proposed plan by $10,000. Option number B is the correct. Right. So just you have to remember this formula and that's it. What is the formula? Right. So let me just write down the formula for you. So just remember that operating profit is equal to contribution per unit multiplied by number of unit subtract fixed cost. And how to compute contribution per unit? So to compute contribution per unit, you have to subtract the selling price minus variable cost. So these two things you have to remember and you can solve any question easily. Right. I hope it is clear. Friends, if you are looking for compilation PDF of all such kind that I'm explaining, you can check out our CCP comprehensive course, which include PDF, videos, mock tests. As you can see, I have separately created folder. So there are 11 previous year question PDF. You can check out. All these things are available in the form of PDF, covering all the questions which have appeared in the 2025 examination. Then is a separate folder of quizzes and mock test where you can practice quizzes, time-based quizzes. Like here you can see module-wise quizzes I have created A, B, C, and D, so on. Right. Inside it, and then further we have created a folder for PDF. In the PDF folder you get PDF module wise arrange A, B, C, D. Inside each module you get unit wise, like unit 1, unit 2 similarly. Inside each unit you get separate theory PDF, separate MCQ PDF, and then further we have videos also. So you can check out the entire course in the video. Similarly, I have created module wise list and I have uploaded videos covering entire the explanation of the theory content. So you can check out the course in the description section. For those who will enroll early, there is a certain discount, and as the course progresses, the price will increase. So you can check out the link in the description section, which is telling you what is the margin. Right, is the new contribution margin ratio if the company move forward with the salary based plan and remove the 10% commission. So let's rewrite the number after removing the commission, because they want to get rid of the 10% commission. Selling price is $200. Right. New variable cost is $110. Earlier it was $130. Right. So what is the contribution per unit? Contribution per unit is 200 minus 110, which is $90. Right. Now, what is the CM ratio? The question is about, contribution margin ratio. You know what it means? CM ratio simply means, in the numerator, you write the contribution. In the denominator, you write the selling price. That's it. Right. So let's put in the value. So contribution they have given 90. Selling price they have given 200. Multiplied by 100. That will be 45% is the correct answer. So the new CM ratio after removing commission is 45%. I hope it was the easiest one to solve. 45%. So you can think of the formula as C by S. Right. CS. Contribution over selling price. That means profit per unit from each rupee of the sale. Right. So that simply means, profit, right? Profit per unit from each rupee of the sale. So this CM ratio tells us what percentage of the sale become contribution. That is what this ratio tells us. In the numerator we write the contribution, in the denominator we write the sale. What percentage of sale become contribution? And contribution, you know it very well. Contribution formula is selling price minus variable cost. So lower variable cost increases contribution, and obviously it increases the VC decreases, C increases, CM ratio increases. Very important. Now the third part of the question is, at what sales volume would the management be indifferent between the two plan? Right. So this is called indifference point. Sometimes the question may be asked, calculate the indifference point. So think of it like this. Proposed plan has a higher fixed cost. How much higher? $150,000 higher fixed cost. Right. And proposed plan has a lower variable cost. Fixed cost higher and variable cost decreases by how much? 20 rupees per unit. Or $20 per unit, not rupees. So the question is, how many unit must we sell so that the extra fixed cost is recovered through the saving of $20 per unit? So it is very simple, very important thing. Let me tell you how to find out the indifference point. So indifference unit is equal to, in the numerator you write increase in fixed cost, in the denominator you write saving in variable cost per unit. Put in the value. So increase in fixed cost is how much? $150,000. And saving in variable cost is how much? $20. So the ratio become how much? 7,500 units. That is called indifference unit. So at 7,500 unit, both plans give the same profit, right? So at 7,500 unit, right? 75 100 unit is a indifference point. Yes, C is the correct answer. So whenever the question asks you indifference point, just remember the formula. What is the formula? Extra fixed cost upon variable cost saved. This is the formula, right? So indifference point is the point where both plan give the same profit. Formula is delta of fixed cost upon delta of variable cost. Always use absolute difference, right? Very important. Now the third question of the same case study is, if the company switches to the proposed plan and expect to sell 10,000 units, what is the margin of safety? Express as a percentage. So again, this question is about, margin of safety. In this question, the company has switches to the proposed plan, and now they expect to sell, budgetary sale is 10,000 unit. What is the break-even point? Break-even point is 6667 unit. First of all, what is the meaning of margin of safety? Let me just explain. So what is this margin of safety? Basically, it tells us how much actual sale can fall before the company start making loss. How much actual sale can fall before company start loss. That is what, margin of safety. So in simple word, it is a safety buffer between the actual sale and the break-even sale. How to compute the margin of sale? Margin of sale is, budgeted sale minus break-even sale divided by budgeted sale. So now let's put in the value. What is the budgeted sale here? Budgeted sale here is a 10,000. What is the break even sale here? 6667 upon 10,000 into 100. That become how much? 33.3%, right? That become 33.3%. So margin of safety is 33.3%. Yes, A is correct. See, budgeted sale minus a break even sale. So break even sale is this much, budgeted sale is this much. Just subtract both of them, divide by budgeted sale. That become 33.333%. Now let's have a look at the next question. So actual minus BEP divided by actual, right? Please remember it. So margin of safety tells us how safe the business is from the loss. And remember, high margin of safety, right? Obviously it indicate lower risk. And the formula is very simple: actual sale minus break even sale upon actual sale. Now next, let's have a look at the next question. So this is again a case study based question. This will help you understand the basic concept here. Let me explain. Let me explain what this question is all about. So they are saying that, Jodak Textile is a gold card holder with an existing Samsung packing credit, that is pre-shipment limit. Last time, lot many questions were asked from pre-shipment. So have a look. So basically Jodak Textile is a gold card holder exporter and already has EPC. How much EPC? 500 lakh. Now due to sudden export order, they need extra fund urgently. So they want to use the standby limit facility under the RBI gold scheme. Because they have extra order, right, that require immediate funding. So they want to utilize the standby credit limit provision. Now the question is, according to the RBI guideline for the gold card scheme, what is the maximum total credit, regular plus standby, that Jodak Textile can access for this urgent order? And what is the maximum time the bank should ideally take to process this specific request? Very good question. It will check your understanding of the gold card scheme very clearly. So please remember, as per the RBI guideline, what does it say? That bank can allow a standby limit. Bank can allow a standby limit of how much? 20% of the sanction export credit limit. So that means 20% of the sanction export credit limit. Now let's compute the same in this case. So as you can see, what is the assess limit? Assess limit is 500 lakh. This is the assess limit. Right. Now, what is the standby limit? A standby limit is just 20% of this 500 lakh, which is how much? 100 lakh. That is the standby limit. So what is the total credit available? Total credit is 500 plus 100, which is equal to 600 lakh. So the maximum total credit that Jodak Textile can access is 600 lakh. Very simple. Access limit is 500 lakh. Standby limit is 20% of that, which is 100 lakh. Just add both of them. This will give you 600 lakh. So the maximum total credit is 600 lakh. What about the time for processing? Yes, very good. See, how much time should the bank ideally take to process this request? So let me tell you the rule. As per the RBI guideline, right? Gold card scheme holder, right? Basically, fast track norm is the fresh sanction, renewal, enhancement for gold card holder, and it should be processed within 25 days. Even though you know it very well that a standby limit are meant to be quicker, the official RBI benchmark mentioned in is 25 days. What is the answer? 25 days. 600 lakh and 25 days. Right. So maximum total credit is 600 lakh. Maximum processing time is 25 days. That's it. So please remember a standby credit, a standby limit credit. What is the gold card? For gold card, you know, extra 20% buffer. Now friends, have a look at the next question. So Mrs. Anjali, right, he get a 40 lakh collateral free loan under CGTMSE. Right. Now her business failed and the account turned into default. Right. Due to severe market downturn, the business failed and account turned into default. So we need to find out how much CGTMSE will be paid to the lender and what AGF. So under the enhanced coverage guideline, what is the maximum amount the trust that CGTMSE will settle for the lender, and what is the maximum annual guarantee fee? Right. So that Anjali would be likely be charged compared to general mail entrepreneur. So option they have given 30 lakh AGF of 1.35%, 36 lakh AGF at reduced price, 34 lakh and 40 lakh. Very good question. So let's understand the special rule for the women under CGTMSE, because this question is most frequently asked. So have a look. See, CGTMSE give higher protection to women borrower. Normally, one lender, they may get 75% to 85% guarantee cover. But for women entrepreneur, the scheme give 90% guarantee cover, So obviously, how to find the settlement amount? Very simple. The guarantee settlement is equal to loan amount multiplied by guarantee percentage. So what is the loan amount? Loan amount is 40 lakh multiplied by 90%, which is equal to 36 lakh. So that means in the case of default, CGTMSE pay the lender how much? 36 lakh. Now what about AGF? AGF is called annual guarantee fee. Yeah. If you talk about the AGF, so AGF, you know what is AGF? So AGF is charged by CGTMSE, right, for providing the guarantee. AGF is charged by CGTMSE for providing the guarantee. For women-led unit, you know, AGF is reduced compared to other. That is means, you know, that AGF is a charge, annual guarantee fee charged by the CGTMSE for providing the guarantee. And for women-led unit, AGF, what happened to AGF? It is reduced compared to other. Right. So typical range for women entrepreneurs start from 0.37% depending on the loan slab. Whereas for male borrower, it can go up to 1.35%. See, it start with 0.37%, and for male borrower, it can go up to 1.35%. Please remember it. So what is the correct answer to this question? So if you look at the correct answer, see, option number B is the correct one. 36 lakh, 90% cover of 40 lakh, and AGF at a reduced rate. Yes, B is the correct one. So please remember, there is a memory trick, you can just recall it regarding women, regarding CGTMSE scheme. Women, right, 90% till 50. 90% till 50. Just remember the line. Women entrepreneur get 90% cover up to 50 lakh. They get enhanced coverage under the CGTMSE. For loan up to 50 lakh, the coverage is 90%. Right. And women borrower pay low AGF starting near 0.37%. Now, have a look at the next question. A very good question it is. So, for 4 women business-led entrepreneur, right? 4 women business-led entrepreneur, they have applied for 1 crore loan under CGTMSE. Right? They have applied for loan under the CGTMSE. So, applicant, they have given that first applicant, we must identify which applicant are not eligible. See, first applicant is a micro unit manufacturing a specialized surgical masks. Applicant number 2 is a small scale startup. Applicant number 3 is a retail trade shop, and 4 number is a small scale unit, right? And obviously it is focused on the vocational and training and education. So basically, based on the CGTMSE eligibility criteria, which of these women-led entrepreneur would not qualify for credit guarantee cover? Option they have given 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, only 4. Very good question. See, Basically, CGTMSE cover mainly two sectors. So did it give you wholly fully fledged answer understanding of the CGTMSE? So CGTMSE it cover primarily for manufacturing sector and the services sector, right? Suppose if a business So let me tell you that suppose there is a business fall in either of these category, either manufacturing or services, right? So eligible. So CGTMSE clearly excludes some category. What are the categories that are not included in CGTMSE? Like real trade, retail trade, sorry, just not real trade, it is retail trade. Retail trade not included, education institution not included, right? SHG not included, and agriculture is not included, right? So now let's check each and every applicant. So if you look at the applicant number 1, which is the manufacturing, yes, they are eligible. If you look at the applicant number 2, startup. So this is a service-based business, so they are eligible. Applicant number 3, retail trade. No. Retail trade is specifically excluded. What about vocational training? No. This is also not. Right. So what is the correct answer? Correct answer is option number 1 and 2. That is A. Right. A is the correct answer. See, manufacturing and services in. M and S in. Right. And R and E out. So manufacturing and services in, retail and education out, right? So CGTMSE cover manufacturing and services sector. It exclude retail, trade and education or training business. Please understand it. Now have a look at the next question. Very good conceptual question based on the priority sector lending. See, basically what is happening here, a scheduled commercial bank is there in Mumbai and population is more than 1 crore, and basically they are processing 3 home loan. Right, they are processing 3 home loan. In the recent examination, such type of case study are being asked. So make sure that you practice this question. And if you want a study material for practice purpose, you can check out our course in the description section, or you can WhatsApp me on this particular number. Now friends, let's come back to the question. So applicant number A want a loan of 48 lakh for flat costing 60 lakh. B want a loan of 55 lakh for flat costing 62 lakh. C want a loan of 12 lakh for repairing the old ancestral home. So our question they have given, according to the latest RBI PSL guideline for center with a population of over 50 lakh, which of this loan can the bank classify under PSL? Under the priority sector. Applicant A and C, A and B, all of the above. Very good question. See, first of all, let me explain you the rule. What does the rule say? So that RBI give PSL status to housing loan if suppose home purchase, right, or construction, loan amount is less than 50 lakh and total cost of dwelling unit cost should be less than equal to 65 lakh. So earlier limit was 63 lakh, now many bank still refers to 65 lakh. What about repair and renovation? So for home purchase, I have just told you, loan should be less than 50 lakh, dwelling unit should be less than 65 lakh. And what about the repair and renovation? So in that case, loan amount should go to maximum 15 lakh. And in this case, they are referring to Mumbai. Mumbai is a city with population more than 50 lakh, right? So if you look at the applicant number A, who is the applicant number A? As you can see, want a loan of 48 lakh for a flat costing 60 lakh. So I think loan is 48 lakh, which is within the 50 lakh limit. And the flat cost is also 63 lakh. This one is also within the 65 lakh limit. So yes, both conditions are satisfied. So yes, A is eligible for PSL. What about B? Want a loan of 55 lakh for a flat costing 65 lakh. But loan cost is more. So obviously PSL criteria fill. What about applicant C? 12 lakh. So it is within the 15 lakh repair limit. So it is perfectly eligible. So we can see that final answer is option number B. Applicant A and applicant number C, both of them classify under PSL. Right. So remember the memory trick. Let me give you a memory trick to remember this rule. Just remember 50, 65, 15. Right. This is the rule for the big city. Right. 50, 65, 15. For population more than 50 lakh. Suppose the population exceeds 50 lakh. Right. 50 is the maximum loan. 50 lakh is the maximum loan for purchase. 65 is the maximum dwelling cost. And this 15 is the maximum loan for repair. Right, just remember it. I hope till now everything is crystal clear. Now let's switch our focus to the next question that we have. So you can see next question we have here. that Global Trader Limited open an LC. So this question pertains to LC, right? They open a letter of credit for $5 lakh. So you can see first question was BEP, second question was the gold card exporter. So different varieties of question we are doing, right? So Global Trader Limited open an LC for $5 lakh. The terms are CIF and the LC allow for parcel shipment. You can see free on board value they have given 1,80,000. Freight is 15,000. Insurance is 5,000. Similarly, FOB is 2 lakh. Freight is 20,000. Insurance is 6,000. Right? They have given. So what is the closing balance or unutilized limit of the LC after these two negotiations? So basically, two parcel shipment are negotiated. Right? That is what is happening here. These are the two parcel shipment. They are negotiated. We must calculate the closing balance, or either you call it closing balance or you call it the unutilized limit. Both are the same thing. So we have been asked to compute the closing balance or unutilized limit of the LC after these two negotiations. So you can see this LC is CIF. They have given the term are CIF. CIF means CIF means the value to be considered are three: cost, insurance, and freight. Right? Cost, insurance, and freight, three value. One is the FOB value, other is the freight value, and third one is the insurance value. Right? All these things are under CIF. You know it very well. Right? So whenever a LC is opened with CIF term, the bank must consider the total landed cost, not just FOB cost. So for each shipment we compute it. Let's compute it for shipment number 1. If you see the shipment number 1, we have FOB 1,80,000, freight 15,000, insurance 5,000. So 1,80,000 plus 15,000 plus 5,000. How much we get? We get 2 lakh. Right? Now shipment number 2. If you compute the same for shipment number 2, so just add all of them. 2 lakh plus 20,000, 2 lakh 20,000 plus 6,000. 2 lakh 26,000. Right? So total LC utilization is how much? Add both of them. See, first utilize how much? First utilize is 2 lakh. And second utilize is 2 lakh 26,000. So overall it become 4 lakh 26,000. So opening LC was how much? Think about it. So opening LC was I think 5 lakh. Just see, yes. They open an LC for $5 lakh. They have mentioned. Opening LC is $5 lakh. Right? And used, how much they have used? So they have used $4,26,000. So obviously how much is unutilized? That is what the question is asking you. See this the method that we are using to compute it. Unutilized limit is how much? 5 lakh minus 4,26,000, which is equal to how much? 74,000. Zenith Manufacturing, right? So the question is, Zenith Manufacturing is reviewing its year-end financial to apply for a new expansion loan. Some data have been given here, like balance sheet highlight they have given. Cash and bank balance 15 lakh, sundry debtor 25 lakh, inventory 40 lakh, prepaid expense 10 lakh, sundry creditor 30 lakh, short-term overdraft 10 lakh, provision for tax is 10 lakh. So I request you to please take a screenshot of it, because these data will be used to solve the question. And so these are balance sheet highlights. Now capital and long term debt they have given. Equity share capital 100 lakh, reserve and surplus 50 lakh, 10% long term debenture, 12% long term debenture. Now what is the current ratio? First question is current ratio they have asked, right? So how to compute the current? First of all, see, for current ratio we need to identify the current asset. So which one is current asset, right? Then only we can say that this is the current asset. So current ratio. So see, cash and bank balance, current asset. Okay, sundry debtor, current asset. Inventory, current asset. Prepaid expense, current asset. Rest one is not. So just add all of them. 15, 25, 40 and 10. Just let me add it. I'm adding it here. Okay. So 15, 25 plus 40 plus 10. That is equal to 90 lakh. Right? So 90 lakh. Now identify the current liability. What are the CL? See, this sundry creditor, current liability. Short-term balance overdraft, current liability. Provision for tax, current liability. Right. So these are the current liability. So add all of them. 30 plus 10 plus 10. Right. So current liability is how much? 30 plus 10 plus 10, which is equal to 50 lakh. Fine. That is current liability. Now it's very simple. Current ratio is current asset upon current liability. Current asset is 90 lakh. Current liability is 50 lakh. 90 upon 5. That will give you 1.80. Right. So the current ratio is 1.80. Fine. Option number A is correct. Friends, we have some more question available that will be covered in the paid batch. If you want to get access to that, you can enroll our paid batch. We will cover remaining question which we have recollected from a student who have appeared in the examination in the next part. Thank you. Have a nice day.